Marcus Wellington stepped out of his black Bentley, the gravel crunching beneath his Italian leather shoes. The massive estate stretched before him like a fortress of marble and glass, its Gothic towers piercing the gray evening sky. After 3 years abroad expanding his business empire across Europe and Asia, he was finally home. The Wellington mansion had been in his family for 4 generations, a testament to old money and older secrets. Marcus had inherited it at 25, along with a fortune that most people could only dream of. Now, at 32, he had tripled that wealth through ruthless business deals and strategic investments. But success had come at a cost: isolation, paranoia, and a growing list of enemies who would stop at nothing to see him fall. The heavy oak doors opened before he could reach for the brass handles. Mrs. Chun, the head housekeeper, stood waiting with her usual stoic expression. Behind her, the marble foyer gleamed under crystal chandeliers, exactly as he remembered it. "Welcome home, Mr. Wellington," she said, taking his coat. "Your rooms have been prepared, and dinner will be served at 8. Marcus nodded, his eyes scanning the familiar surroundings. Everything appeared perfect, pristine even. Yet something felt different. Perhaps it was the silence that seemed too heavy, or the way the shadows fell across the marble floors. He had developed an instinct for danger during his years in business, and that instinct was now whispering warnings. "How many staff are currently employed here?" he asked, loosening his tie. 12, sir. The usual household staff, plus the new additions you approved last month." Marcus frowned. He hadn't approved any new staff. His assistant, Rebecca, handled such matters, but she always consulted him first. New additions? Mrs. Chin's expression didn't change. The additional security personnel and the new kitchen maid all came with excellent references. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. He made a mental note to review all recent hiring decisions. In his world, new faces meant potential threats. Too many business rivals would pay handsomely for inside information about his personal life, his routines, his vulnerabilities. "I'll be in my study," he said, heading toward the West Wing. "Hold my calls." The study was his sanctuary, lined with first-edition books and equipped with state-of-the-art security systems. He poured himself a glass of aged whiskey and settled behind his massive mahogany desk. Through the bulletproof windows, he could see the meticulously maintained gardens where his mother had once walked every morning before her mysterious death 10 years ago. Marcus pulled out his encrypted phone and dialed Rebecca's number. She answered on the first ring, her voice crisp and professional even at this late hour. "Marcus, welcome back. How was the flight?" "Fine. Rebecca, tell me about the new staff members at the estate." There was a pause. "What new staff members? I haven't authorized any new hires for the estate in 6 months." His blood turned cold. Mrs. Chun mentioned new security personnel and a kitchen maid, all supposedly approved last month. "That's impossible. Every hiring decision goes through me, and I keep detailed records." "Marcus, something's wrong. You need to." The line went dead. Marcus tried calling back, but the call wouldn't connect. He checked his phone. No signal. In a house equipped with the latest technology, including signal boosters, this was impossible. Someone was jamming communications. He moved to his computer, only to find the internet connection severed as well. His fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing offline security systems. The estate's internal cameras were still functioning, and what he saw made his blood run cold. 3 men in black tactical gear were moving through the East Wing, their faces covered by masks. They moved with military precision, clearly familiar with the mansion's layout. In the kitchen, he spotted a young woman who must be the new maid Mrs. Chun had mentioned. But, unlike the other staff members who appeared to be going about their evening duties, she was standing perfectly still, watching the security monitor that displayed the main entrance. Marcus's mind raced. This was clearly a coordinated attack. Someone had infiltrated his staff, cut his communications, and now armed men were inside his home. But who was behind it? The list of potential enemies was long. Disgruntled business partners, competitors he had outmaneuvered, or perhaps someone connected to his mother's death. He opened a hidden panel in his desk, revealing a loaded Glock 19 and a backup satellite phone. But, as he reached for the weapon, a soft knock came at the study door. "Mr. Wellington?" It was a woman's voice, unfamiliar but calm. "May I come in? I have something important to tell you." Marcus drew the gun, keeping it low but ready. "Who are you?" "My name is Elena Vasquez. I'm the new kitchen maid." "Please, sir, I need to speak with you urgently. Your life is in danger." Every instinct told him not to trust her. She could be part of the attack, sent to lure him out of his secure study. But something in her tone gave him pause. There was no deception in her voice, only urgency and what sounded like genuine concern. "The door is unlocked," he said, keeping the gun trained on the entrance. A young woman entered, probably in her mid-20s,
You
with dark
will
hair
listen to
pulled
me
back
now.
in a simple ponytail and wearing a standard maid's uniform. Her eyes were intelligent and alert, scanning the room quickly before focusing on him. When she saw the gun, she didn't flinch. "Mr. Wellington, my name is Elena Vasquez, and I'm not really a maid. I'm an undercover federal agent, and I've been placed here to protect you." Marcus kept the gun steady. "Prove it." She slowly reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a badge and identification. "I work for a joint task force investigating your business partner, Victor Petrov. We have credible intelligence that he's planning to have you killed tonight." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Victor Petrov, his partner in several European ventures, a man he had trusted with millions of dollars and sensitive information. But it made sense. Victor had been pushing for changes in their partnership agreements, changes that would have given him control of Marcus's overseas operations. "Why should I trust you?" Marcus asked, though he was already beginning to believe her. "Because I'm the only thing standing between you and 3 trained assassins who are currently searching this house for you," Elena replied. "And because if I wanted you dead, you would already be dead." As if to punctuate her words, the sound of breaking glass echoed from somewhere in the mansion, followed by muffled shouts. The attack was escalating. Elena moved closer, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "Listen carefully, Mr. Wellington. We need to get you out of here, but we have to move smart. They know this house better than you think. Someone's been feeding them information for weeks." "Who?" "We're not sure yet, but we suspect it's someone close to you, someone with access to your schedule and security protocols. That's why I'm here undercover. We needed someone on the inside." Marcus's mind was reeling. A federal investigation, assassins in his home, a traitor among his staff. It was like something out of a nightmare. But Elena's presence, her calm professionalism in the face of danger, gave him a strange sense of hope. "What's the plan?" he asked, finally, lowering his weapon slightly. "First, we need to get to your panic room. You do have one, right?" Marcus nodded. Every mansion in his tax bracket had a panic room, though he'd never imagined he would need to use it. "Basement level, behind the wine cellar." "Good. But we can't take the main corridors. They'll be watching the obvious routes. Is there another way?" Marcus thought quickly. The mansion had been built with numerous hidden passages, a quirk of his great-grandfather's paranoid imagination. "There's a service corridor that runs behind the walls. It connects this room to the basement." "Perfect. But first, I need you to do exactly what I say. Be silent if you value your life. From this moment on, no talking unless absolutely necessary. These men are professionals, and they're equipped with audio surveillance gear. One sound could give away our position." Elena moved to the window, peering out at the grounds. "There are more of them outside. At least 6 that I can see, maybe more. This isn't just an assassination attempt. It's a military-style operation." Marcus felt a chill of fear unlike anything he had experienced in the boardroom. In business, threats were usually financial or legal. This was life and death, and he was completely out of his element. Elena turned back to him, her expression serious. "Mr. Wellington, I need you to understand something. The next few hours are going to test you in ways you've never been tested before. These people want you dead, and they have the resources and skills to make it happen. But I'm going to do everything in my power to keep you alive." She paused, listening intently. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, growing closer. "They're almost here. Where's the entrance to the hidden passage?" Marcus moved to the bookshelf on the far wall, pressing a concealed button behind a leather-bound volume of Shakespeare. A section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow corridor lit by emergency lighting. "Stay close to me," Elena whispered, producing a small pistol from somewhere in her uniform. "And remember, not a sound." They slipped into the passage just as the study door exploded inward. Through the gap, Marcus could see masked figures pouring into the room, their weapons drawn. His heart pounded as he realized how close they had come to being caught. Elena led the way through the narrow passage, moving with the confidence of someone who had studied the mansion's blueprints extensively. They descended a hidden staircase, the sound of their footsteps muffled by thick carpeting. Behind them, Marcus could hear the assassins searching his study, their angry voices carrying through the walls. As they moved deeper into the bowels of the mansion, Marcus's mind was racing with questions. How long had Elena been watching him? How much did she know about his business dealings? And, most importantly, could he really trust her, or was this all part of some elaborate trap? The passage opened into a sub-basement he had forgotten existed, a relic from the mansion's early days when it had served as part of the Underground Railroad. Stone walls glistened with moisture, and the air smelled of age and secrets. Elena stopped at an intersection of corridors, checking her watch. The panic room is just ahead, but we have a problem. If they're as well-informed as I think they are, they'll know about it too. It might be a trap, Marcus whispered. Then, what do? We improvise. There's an old tunnel system that connects to the neighboring estate. It was built during Prohibition for smuggling liquor. If we can reach it, we can get you to safety. They moved through the underground maze, Elena's flashlight cutting through the darkness. Marcus had never realized how extensive the underground network beneath his property was. His ancestors had clearly been planning for threats he had never imagined. Suddenly, Elena held up her hand, signaling for silence. In the distance, they could hear voices echoing through the tunnels. The assassins had found the passage. They're following us, Elena breathed. We need to move faster. They broke into a run, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls despite their efforts to remain quiet. Behind them, the voices grew louder, more urgent. Flashlight beams began to dance on the walls behind them, getting closer with each passing second. Elena led him through a series of turns that seemed random, but were clearly part of a predetermined route. She had studied these tunnels, prepared for this exact scenario. The realization struck Marcus that the federal government had been watching him for some time, long enough to plant an agent in his household and map every inch of his property. They reached a heavy wooden door bound with iron. Elena produced a key from her pocket, her hands steady despite the urgency of their situation. This leads to the old wine storage facility on the adjacent property. From there, we can reach the road. As the door swung open, cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and freedom. But Elena hesitated, listening intently. Something's wrong, she said. It's too quiet out there. Marcus strained his ears but heard nothing except the distant sound of traffic on the main road. Maybe they don't know about this exit. Elena shook her head. These people are professionals. They would have scouted every possible escape route. She pulled out her phone, checking for a signal. Still jammed. But that confirms they have sophisticated equipment and extensive planning. The sound of pursuing footsteps grew closer. They had no choice but to risk the exit. Elena stepped out first, her weapon drawn, scanning the darkness. The old wine storage facility was a crumbling stone building surrounded by overgrown vegetation. Clear, she whispered, motioning for Marcus to follow. They moved through the ruins, staying low and using the crumbling walls for cover. In the distance, Marcus could see the lights of the main road, safety just a few hundred yards away. But Elena was right to be cautious. This felt too easy. As they approached the edge of the property, Elena suddenly grabbed Marcus's arm, pulling him down behind a low stone wall. Don't move, she breathed. Through the gaps in the stone, Marcus could see figures positioned along the tree line. They were trapped, caught between the assassins pursuing them through the tunnels and those waiting outside. Elena had been right. This had been anticipated. How many? Marcus whispered. At least four that I can see. Probably more. Elena checked her ammunition. I can take a few of them, but not all. We need another option. Marcus's business mind kicked into gear, analyzing the situation like a hostile takeover. They had assets, knowledge of the terrain, the element of surprise, and Elena's training. They also had liabilities, superior numbers, professional killers, and limited ammunition. There's another way, he said quietly. The old groundskeeper's cottage has a garage with vehicles. If we can reach it, We might be able to drive out. They crawled through the drainage ditch, cold water seeping through their clothes as they moved toward the groundskeeper's cottage. Elena moved like a shadow, her training evident in every calculated movement. Marcus tried to match her stealth, but his expensive suit and dress shoes were hardly designed for covert operations. The cottage loomed ahead, a small stone building that housed the estate's maintenance equipment. Marcus knew the garage contained several vehicles, an old pickup truck used for grounds work, a small tractor, and his groundskeeper's personal motorcycle. Any of them would be better than staying trapped between armed killers. Elena raised her hand, signaling a stop. She pointed to her ear and, then, to the cottage. Marcus strained to listen and heard what she had detected, the low murmur of voices coming from inside the building. The assassins had anticipated this escape route as well. How many? Marcus mouthed silently. Elena held up 2 fingers, then pointed to herself and made a cutting motion across her throat. She was going to take them out. Marcus watched in fascination and horror as she transformed from a mild-mannered maid into a lethal predator. She moved around the side of the cottage, disappearing into the shadows. Marcus waited, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure it could be heard for miles. Minutes passed like hours until he heard a brief scuffle, then silence. Elena reappeared, beckoning him forward. 2 down, she whispered as he joined her. But we need to move fast. Their communication blackout won't last long, and when their team doesn't check in, more will come. Inside the garage, Marcus was relieved to see the old pickup truck exactly where he had expected it. Elena was already checking under the hood, her movements efficient and professional. Keys? She asked. Marcus felt around the driver's seat and found them hanging from a hook near the steering wheel. His groundskeeper, Miguel, had always been trusting to a fault. Got them. Can you drive stick shift? Marcus nodded, though he hadn't driven a manual transmission since college. Elena slipped into the passenger seat, her weapon ready as he started the engine. The truck coughed to life, its rumbling engine impossibly loud in the quiet night. Drive straight for the main road, Elena instructed. Don't stop for anything. If we encounter resistance, I'll handle it. Marcus put the truck in gear and pressed the accelerator. They burst out of the garage, headlights cutting through the darkness. Almost immediately, muzzle flashes erupted from the tree line. The windshield spiderwebbed as bullets struck it, and Elena returned fire through the passenger window. Faster, she shouted over the sound of gunfire. Marcus floored the accelerator, the old truck responding with surprising power. They bounced across the uneven terrain, heading for the main road that represented freedom. Behind them, vehicle engines roared to life as their pursuers gave chase. They've got cars, Elena observed, checking the side mirror. This truck won't outrun them on the open road. Marcus's mind raced. The main highway was still 2 miles away through winding country roads. The pickup was reliable, but not fast, and their pursuers likely had high-performance vehicles. They needed another plan. There's a back way to town through the old logging roads, he said, taking a hard right onto a dirt path barely wide enough for the truck. It's rough, but it leads directly to the police station. Elena nodded approvingly. Good thinking. These roads will neutralize their speed advantage. The truck bounced violently as they navigated the narrow logging road. Tree branches scraped against the windows, and more than once Marcus was sure they would get stuck in the deep ruts. But the old pickup held together, its 4-wheel drive system grabbing traction where a normal car would have failed. Behind them, the pursuing vehicles had fallen back, unable to match their pace on the treacherous terrain. Marcus began to feel hope for the first time since this nightmare had begun. Elena, he said, keeping his eyes on the difficult road ahead, I need to know what's really going on. You mentioned Viktor Petrov, but this seems bigger than one business partner wanting me dead. Elena was silent for a moment, apparently weighing how much to reveal. The truth is complicated, Mr. Wellington. Viktor Petrov is connected to an international criminal organization that launders money through legitimate businesses. Your partnership with him made you a person of interest in our investigation. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Are you saying I'm under investigation? You were. But our surveillance revealed that you were unaware of Petrov's real business. However, you had become a liability to his organization. You knew too much about their financial operations, even if you didn't understand the significance. The implications hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. His European expansion, his successful partnerships, his triumph in international markets, all of it had been built on dirty money. He had been an unwitting accomplice to criminals, and now they wanted him dead to protect their secrets. "How long have you been watching me?" he asked. 6 months. We placed several agents in your organization and your personal staff. The goal was to gather evidence against Petrov while keeping you safe. But something went wrong. Someone leaked information about our investigation. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. "You think there's a mole in the federal task force?" It's the only explanation for how well coordinated this attack is. They knew about our surveillance. They knew about me. And they knew exactly when you would be returning home. They reached a fork in the logging road. Marcus hesitated, trying to remember which path led to town. It had been years since he had explored these back roads. And in the darkness, they all looked the same. "Left or right?" Elena asked, checking behind them for signs of pursuit. "I think left, but I'm not certain." "Think harder. If we get lost out here, we're dead." Marcus closed his eyes, trying to remember childhood adventures in these woods with his father. They had gone hunting here when he was 12, following these same roads to reach a remote cabin. His father had always taken the left fork when heading toward town. "Left," he said with more confidence. They took the left fork, and Marcus was relieved when the road began to slope downward, indicating they were heading toward the valley where the town was located. But their relief was short-lived as headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. "They found us," Elena said, rolling down her window and preparing to return fire. The pursuing vehicle was gaining fast, its more powerful engine eating up the distance. Marcus could see it was a black SUV, the kind favored by security companies and criminal organizations alike. Muzzle flashes erupted from its windows as the occupants opened fire. "Duck!" Elena shouted, returning fire with her handgun. The rear window of the pickup exploded, showering them with glass. Marcus fought to keep the truck on the narrow road as bullets struck the tailgate and bumper. The engine began to sputter, indicating they had taken a hit to something vital. "We're not going to make it," Marcus said, watching the temperature gauge climb toward the red zone. Elena assessed their situation with professional calm. "How far to town?" "Maybe a mile, but this engine won't last that long." "Then we stop them here." Elena pulled a larger weapon from somewhere in her uniform. Marcus hadn't even seen her carrying it. "When I say brake, hit the brakes hard and turn the wheel sharp right." Marcus didn't question her plan. "Ready. Now." He slammed on the brakes and cranked the wheel hard right. The pickup skidded sideways, blocking the narrow road. Elena was out of the truck before it had fully stopped, using the truck bed as cover as she engaged their pursuers. The SUV screeched to a halt, its occupants spilling out with military precision. But Elena had chosen her position well. The narrow road gave her a tactical advantage, forcing their attackers to approach along a predictable route. Marcus watched in amazement as Elena systematically picked off their attackers. Her marksmanship was incredible, each shot finding its target with deadly accuracy. But there were more of them than bullets in her gun, and she was forced to take cover as return fire intensified. "Stay down," she shouted to Marcus, who was crouched behind the truck's engine block. But Marcus wasn't content to hide while Elena fought for both their lives. His eyes fell on a toolbox in the truck bed. Among the standard tools, he found something useful, a flare gun that Miguel used for emergency signaling. As Elena reloaded, Marcus took aim at the SUV's fuel tank and fired. The flare struck true, and the vehicle erupted in flames, illuminating the forest road like a bonfire. The explosion sent their attackers diving for cover, giving Elena the opening she needed. "Nice shot," she called out. "But we need to move. That fire will draw attention from both sides." They abandoned the pickup, moving on foot through the forest toward town. The burning SUV provided an ominous backdrop, its flames reaching high into the night sky. Marcus could hear sirens in the distance. Someone had noticed the explosion. "This way," Elena said, leading him off the road and into the thick woods. "We'll approach town from the forest. It's safer than the open road." They crashed through undergrowth, branches tearing at their clothes. Marcus's expensive suit was ruined, but he had never cared less about his appearance. Survival was the only priority now. After 20 minutes of difficult hiking, they emerged at the edge of town. The familiar streets of his childhood looked surreal in the orange glow of streetlights. Elena led him directly to the police station, a small brick building that had served the community for decades. "We need to be careful," Elena warned as they approached. "If there's a leak in the federal task force, local law enforcement might not be safe either." Marcus realized the horrible truth. They couldn't trust anyone. His wealth and status, which had always provided security and comfort, now made him a target. The people he had trusted, the systems he had relied on, all of it was compromised. Inside the police station, Chief Morrison looked up from his paperwork with surprise. Marcus had known him for years. Morrison had been a young officer when Marcus was a child, and they had maintained a cordial relationship through various community events. "Marcus, what happened to you? You look like you've been through a war." Elena stepped forward, producing her federal credentials. "Chief Morrison, I'm Agent Vasquez. Mr. Wellington is under federal protection, and we've just survived an assassination attempt. I need to use your secure communications to contact my superiors." Morrison examined the credentials carefully. "Agent Vasquez, we haven't been notified of any federal operations in our jurisdiction." "That's because the operation was compromised," Elena explained. "We have reason to believe there's a security leak. I need to make contact with my backup team immediately." Morrison gestured toward his office. "Use the phone in there. It's a direct line that's swept for bugs weekly." As Elena made her calls, Marcus sat in the main office, trying to process everything that had happened. A few hours ago, he had been a successful businessman returning home from a triumphant international tour. Now he was a target for assassination, his business empire built on criminal money, and his only protection was a federal agent he had just met. Elena emerged from Morrison's office, her expression grim. "My backup team is compromised. 3 agents are dead, and the others are missing. Someone leaked our entire operational plan." Chief Morrison's face went pale. "How many more are coming for him?" "Unknown. But we have to assume this town isn't safe either. They have resources and connections we're only beginning to understand." Marcus stood up, decision crystallizing in his mind. "Then we run. We disappear until you can figure out who's betraying the investigation." Elena nodded. "It's the smartest option. But running means leaving everything behind. Your business, your property, your identity. Are you prepared for that?" Marcus looked around the police station, at Chief Morrison's concerned face, at the familiar surroundings of his hometown. Everything he had worked for, everything he had built, was now a liability. His empire had been constructed on quicksand, and it was all crumbling beneath his feet. "What choice do I have?" he said finally. "If I stay, I'm dead. If I run, at least I have a chance." Elena's expression softened slightly. "There's something else you should know. This goes deeper than Viktor Petrov. The organization he works for has connections to several prominent business leaders, politicians, and law enforcement officials. Taking them down could bring down a network that reaches the highest levels of government." The weight of that revelation settled on Marcus like a physical burden. He wasn't just running for his life. He was potentially the key to exposing a vast criminal conspiracy. His knowledge of Petrov's business operations, his access to financial records, his understanding of international transactions, all of it could be crucial evidence. "You're asking me to help bring down the very network that made me wealthy," he said. "I'm asking you to help bring down the network that's trying to kill you," Elena corrected. "The choice is yours, but either way, we need to move. This police station won't stay safe for long." Chief Morrison cleared his throat. "If you're leaving, I can provide an unmarked police car cut through the pre-dawn darkness." As Elena drove them toward the state border, Marcus sat in the passenger seat, watching his hometown disappear in the rearview mirror, possibly forever. They had been driving for 2 hours, taking back roads, and avoiding major highways where their pursuers might be watching. Elena had proven to be more than just an undercover agent. Her knowledge of criminal networks, safe houses, and escape routes suggested she had been working these cases for years. She drove with the confidence of someone who had fled dangerous situations before. "Where are we going?" Marcus asked as they passed a sign indicating they were entering Pennsylvania. "Philadelphia. I have contacts there who can provide safe accommodation while we figure out our next move." Elena glanced at him. "But first, I need to know everything about your business relationship with Viktor Petrov. Every detail could be important. Marcus leaned back in his seat, organizing his thoughts. I met Viktor 3 years ago at an international trade conference in London. He was representing a consortium of Eastern European investors looking to partner with American companies for expansion into European markets. What kind of businesses? Import-export, primarily. Luxury goods, electronics, automotive parts. He had connections with manufacturers and distributors across Russia, Ukraine, and the Baltic states. It seemed like a legitimate operation. He had offices in major cities, proper documentation, everything appeared above board. Elena nodded, but her expression remained skeptical. Criminal organizations often maintain legitimate fronts. What kind of money were you dealing with? Substantial amounts. Our first joint venture was worth $50 million. We were importing high-end electronics from Eastern Europe and distributing them through my retail network in the United States. The profits were incredible, better than anything I had seen in domestic markets. Too good to be true, Elena observed. Classic money laundering setup. They inflate prices on legitimate goods to wash dirty money through the system. You were essentially helping them clean millions of dollars in criminal proceeds. The implications made Marcus feel sick. His business success, his expanding empire, his reputation as a brilliant entrepreneur, all of it had been built on dirty money. I had no idea. The paperwork was all legitimate. The goods were real products. The customers were genuine retailers. That's how the best operations work. They use unwitting accomplices who can pass any scrutiny because they genuinely believe they're running clean businesses. Elena took an exit toward a small industrial city. Tell me about the financial arrangements. Viktor's organization handled all the overseas transactions. They had their own banks, their own shipping companies, their own logistics networks. My role was purely domestic, receiving the goods and distributing them through my existing channels. Did you ever question why they needed an American partner? A consortium with their resources could have established their own distribution network. Marcus had wondered about that, but Viktor's explanations had always been reasonable. He said American businesses faced fewer regulatory hurdles, that having an established domestic partner with existing relationships was more efficient than building from scratch. And, more importantly, it provided legitimacy and cover for their operations. Elena pulled into the parking lot of a rundown motel. This is where we stop for now. It's not glamorous, but it's off the grid. The motel looked like something from the 1970s, with faded paint and flickering neon signs. Marcus had never stayed anywhere so shabby, but, given the circumstances, it might as well have been a five-star resort. They were alive, and that was what mattered. Elena registered them under false names, paying cash for adjoining rooms. Get some rest, she said. Tomorrow we start planning how to take down Petrov's network. But sleep wouldn't come for Marcus. He lay on the uncomfortable bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, replaying every interaction he had ever had with Viktor Petrov. How had he been so blind? There had been signs, the unusually favorable terms, the reluctance to discuss certain aspects of their overseas operations, the high-level connections that seemed to open doors too easily. Around dawn, he heard a soft knock at the door connecting their rooms. Elena entered, looking more rested than he felt despite having been on guard duty all night. I've been in contact with my superiors, she said. The situation is worse than we thought. The leak in our task force came from someone with top-level clearance. They know everything about our investigation, our evidence, our witness protection protocols. Marcus felt a chill of despair. So we can't trust federal protection. Not through normal channels. But I have an alternative plan. There's a joint international task force investigating money laundering operations. They're based out of Interpol headquarters in Lyon, France. If we can get there, we might be safe from American corruption. You want us to flee to Europe? But that's where Petrov's organization is based. Elena smiled grimly. Sometimes the safest place is right under your enemy's nose. Besides, you know Petrov's European operations better than anyone. Your knowledge could be the key to bringing down the entire network. The idea of returning to Europe, where his nightmare had begun, filled Marcus with dread. But Elena was right. His insider knowledge of Petrov's business operations made him invaluable as a witness. He knew account numbers, shipping routes, key personnel, financial structures that no outside investigation could penetrate. How do we get to Europe without being detected? Carefully. I have contacts who can provide false documentation, but it will take time. Meanwhile, we need to stay hidden and gather evidence. Elena pulled out a laptop. I need you to write down everything you remember about your business dealings with Petrov. Every transaction, every meeting, every piece of documentation. For the next several hours, Marcus worked on documenting his relationship with Viktor Petrov. The process was like performing surgery on his own life, cutting away the lies to expose the underlying cancer. Every successful deal, every profitable quarter, every expansion into new markets, all of it tainted by association with criminal enterprise. Elena worked on her own laptop, coordinating with her remaining contacts and arranging their escape route. But around noon, she suddenly stiffened, staring at her screen. What is it? Marcus asked. News report from your hometown. Your estate burned down last night. They're calling it an electrical fire, but the timing is too convenient. Marcus pulled up the news report on his phone. The mansion where his family had lived for 4 generations was gone, reduced to a smoking ruin. The official story blamed faulty wiring in the old building, but Marcus knew better. They were erasing evidence, eliminating any trace of their infiltration. They're being very thorough, Elena observed. This suggests they plan to disappear completely after eliminating you. No witnesses, no evidence, no trail to follow. A new thought struck Marcus. Elena, if they're willing to burn down a historical mansion to cover their tracks, what about other witnesses? What about my staff, my employees, people who might have seen something? Elena's expression darkened. We need to assume everyone associated with you is in danger. Your household staff, your business associates, your personal assistant Rebecca, they're all potential targets. Marcus felt a wave of guilt and responsibility. His involvement with Petrov had put innocent people in danger. His housekeeper Mrs. Chun, his groundskeeper Miguel, his assistant Rebecca who had been with him for 5 years. All of them might be marked for death because of his blind pursuit of profit. We have to warn them, he said. We can't. Any attempt to contact them would reveal our location and compromise our safety. The best way to protect them is to take down Petrov's organization as quickly as possible. It was a cold calculation, but Marcus recognized its logic. Still, the thought of innocent people dying because of his mistakes was almost unbearable. He had always prided himself on being a responsible employer, someone who took care of his people. Now his very association with them had become a death sentence. Elena's laptop chimed with an incoming message. She read it quickly, her expression growing more serious. What now? Marcus asked. My contact in Philadelphia has been compromised. Someone leaked our destination. We need to move now. They packed quickly, abandoning the motel just as Marcus was beginning to feel relatively safe. Elena drove them deeper into Pennsylvania, avoiding major roads and stopping frequently to check for surveillance. Her paranoia, which had seemed excessive earlier, now appeared entirely justified. How many people knew about Philadelphia? Marcus asked. Too many. The federal task force, the local FBI office, several support personnel. Any one of them could be the leak. Elena checked her mirrors constantly. We're going to have to disappear completely. New identities, new destination, complete radio silence. For how long? However long it takes to get to Europe and make contact with Interpol. Could be days, could be weeks. The prospect of weeks in hiding, constantly looking over his shoulder, filled Marcus with exhaustion. But as they drove through the Pennsylvania countryside, he began to understand that his old life was over regardless. Even if they successfully exposed Petrov's network, even if they brought down the entire criminal organization, Marcus Wellington, the billionaire businessman, was finished. His reputation would never recover from association with money laundering. His business empire would crumble under investigation. His personal fortune, built partly on dirty money, would be seized by authorities. He would be lucky to avoid criminal charges himself, even as a cooperating witness. Elena, he said quietly, what happens to me after we expose Petrov? She glanced at him, and he saw sympathy in her eyes. Honestly, your old life is over. You'll likely enter witness protection, receive a new identity, start over somewhere safe. The government will provide basic support, but your wealth, your status, your connections, all of that disappears. It was what he had expected, but hearing it confirmed still hit him like a physical blow. 32 years old, and he was facing the complete destruction of everything he had worked for. But as they drove through a small farming community where people lived simple, honest lives, Marcus began to wonder if that might not be entirely bad. His wealth had isolated him from real human connection. His status had attracted hangers-on and fortune hunters rather than genuine friends. His business success had required him to focus on profit above all else, leaving little room for family, relationships, or personal happiness. Perhaps starting over wasn't a punishment. Perhaps it was an opportunity. Elena pulled into a truck stop, parking among the big rigs where their small car would be less noticeable. I need to make some calls and arrange new documentation. Stay close and keep your head down. As she walked toward the truck stop's restaurant, Marcus watched the normal people going about their daily routines, truckers grabbing coffee, families traveling on vacation, workers on their lunch breaks. None of them were billionaires, but they looked more content than he had felt in years. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Stop running. We know where you are. Come home, and this ends quietly. Marcus showed the message to Elena when she returned. She studied it with professional interest. They're getting desperate, she observed. This kind of direct contact suggests they're running out of time and options. Someone's putting pressure on them to resolve this situation quickly. What kind of pressure? Could be law enforcement closing in on other parts of their operation. Could be internal power struggles. Could be that your knowledge poses a bigger threat than we realized. Elena started the engine. Either way, it means we're making them nervous. That's good for us. They drove through the afternoon, stopping only for gas and food. Elena used a series of burner phones to make contact with underground networks that specialized in providing false documentation and safe passage for people who needed to disappear. As evening approached, they reached a small city near the Maryland border where Elena's contact maintained a safe house. It was an ordinary suburban home that looked like it belonged to a middle-class family, complete with a minivan in the driveway and children's toys in the yard. Appearances can be deceiving, Elena said as they parked. This house has hidden compartments, escape routes, and enough security equipment to rival a government facility. They were met at the door by a woman in her 40s who looked like a suburban mother but moved with the fluid confidence of a trained operative. She introduced herself only as Sarah and led them inside. I've prepared documents that will get you to Europe, Sarah said, producing 2 passports and supporting identification. But the heat is intense right now. Every airport, train station, and border crossing is being watched. You'll need to take the scenic route. Elena examined the passports. How scenic? Sarah led them to a basement room that resembled a professional salon crossed with a theatrical costume department. Wigs, makeup, clothing in various sizes, and even contact lenses to change eye color lined the walls. Marcus realized he was about to undergo a complete physical transformation. The key to a successful identity change isn't just documents, Sarah explained, selecting items from the extensive wardrobe. It's becoming the person on paper, inside and out. David Miller doesn't carry himself like a billionaire. He doesn't wear expensive clothes or speak with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms. For the next several hours, Marcus learned to become David Miller. Sarah taught him to slouch slightly, to dress in unremarkable middle-class clothing, to speak in a more hesitant manner. She dyed his hair a mousy brown and gave him glasses that completely changed his facial appearance. Elena underwent her own transformation, becoming Jennifer Shaw, supposedly David's girlfriend and fellow consultant. Her expertise in assuming false identities was evident as she effortlessly adopted new mannerisms and speech patterns. The ship we're taking is a cargo vessel that occasionally carries passengers, Sarah briefed them. You'll be sharing quarters with other people who need to travel off the grid. Don't ask questions about their backgrounds, and don't volunteer information about yours. As they prepared for their journey, Marcus found himself thinking about the employees he was leaving behind. His assistant Rebecca, his household staff, his business partners. Were they safe, or had Petrov's organization decided to eliminate anyone with knowledge of their activities? Elena, I need to know what happened to my people, he said quietly while Sarah prepared final documentation. I understand your concern, but investigating would compromise our mission and potentially endanger more people. Elena adjusted her new appearance in a mirror. The best protection we can offer them is to successfully expose this organization. Marcus knew she was right, but the guilt gnawed at him. These people had trusted him, worked for him loyally, and now they might be paying the price for his poor judgment in business partners. That evening, Sarah drove them to Baltimore in an unremarkable sedan. The port was a maze of shipping containers, cranes, and industrial buildings stretching for miles along the waterfront. Among the massive container ships, their cargo vessel looked small and weathered. "The captain's name is Anderson," Sarah said as they approached the gangway. "He's been helping people disappear for 20 years. You can trust him, but remember, you're paying passengers, nothing more. Keep your stories simple." Captain Anderson was a weathered man in his 60s with the steady demeanor of someone who had spent his life navigating both literal and figurative storms. He examined their papers briefly and nodded approval. "You'll be sharing quarters with 2 other passengers," he said in accented English. "Meals are in the galley at 0800, 1300, and 1900. We don't ask questions, and we don't answer them." Their cabin was barely larger than a closet, with 2 narrow bunks and a tiny porthole that looked out onto the dark ocean. After the luxury Marcus was accustomed to, the accommodations were jarring, but he was learning to appreciate simple safety over comfort. The other passengers were a middle-aged woman who spoke no English and a young man who looked like he hadn't slept in days. True to the captain's policy, no introductions were made, and everyone kept to themselves. As the ship left port, Marcus stood on deck watching the lights of Baltimore fade into darkness. Somewhere behind those lights, people were probably still hunting for him. His former life, his business empire, his identity as Marcus Wellington, all of it was disappearing like the coastline. Second thoughts. Elena joined him at the rail. "About exposing Petrov?" "No, but I keep thinking about the life I'm leaving behind." Marcus gripped the rail as the ship hit open ocean swells. 3 days ago, I was on top of the world. Now I'm a fugitive with no money, no identity, and no future. "You have something more valuable than money now," Elena said. "You have the truth, and the chance to prevent other people from going through what you've experienced." The crossing to Rotterdam took 8 days. Marcus had never been on a cargo ship before, and the constant motion, industrial noise, and cramped quarters tested his endurance. But the forced isolation gave him time to think, to process everything that had happened, and to prepare for what lay ahead. Elena spent the voyage coaching him on what to expect when they reached Europe. The International Task Force operated differently from American law enforcement, with representatives from multiple countries and complex jurisdictional arrangements. "The key is your insider knowledge of Petrov's financial networks," she explained during one of their conversations. "You know account numbers, transaction patterns, shipping routes that no outside investigation could uncover. But you'll need to provide concrete evidence, not just testimony." Marcus had been thinking about that problem. Most of the documentation is electronic, stored on secured servers. "But I have personal copies of some contracts and correspondence that might be useful." "Where?" "Safety deposit boxes in 3 different banks. I've always believed in keeping hard copies of important documents." Marcus smiled grimly. "Paranoia pays off sometimes. Can you access them without triggering surveillance?" "The boxes are registered under shell companies I set up years ago for privacy. As long as my false identity is good enough to fool the banks, we should be able to retrieve them." On their 7th day at sea, Elena received a coded message on a satellite phone the captain provided for emergencies. Her face went pale as she read it. "What is it?" Marcus asked. 3 more federal agents are dead. Someone is systematically eliminating everyone connected to the investigation." Elena stared at the message. "And there's something else. Your assistant Rebecca is missing." Marcus felt like he had been punched in the stomach. Rebecca had been more than an employee. She was a friend, one of the few people he trusted completely. The thought of her being hurt because of his association with criminals was almost unbearable. "We have to do something," he said. "There's nothing we can do from here." But it confirms that Petrov's organization is in full damage control mode. They're eliminating anyone who might have information that could hurt them. The implications were terrifying. If they were willing to kill federal agents and innocent civilians, They would stop at nothing to prevent Marcus from testifying against them. The safe haven of Europe suddenly seemed much less safe. When they finally reached Rotterdam, the industrial port city looked like salvation despite its gray skies and industrial landscape. Captain Anderson arranged for them to disembark quietly, avoiding the main passenger terminals where surveillance might be watching. "From here, you're on your own," he said, shaking hands with both of them. "But if you ever need passage again, you know how to reach me." Elena had arranged to meet their European contact at a small cafe near the train station. The man introduced himself as Inspector Klaus Weber from the German Federal Police, a tall, serious individual who spoke English with precise formality. "The situation has deteriorated since you left America," Weber informed them over coffee. "Petrov's organization has accelerated their operations, liquidating assets and eliminating witnesses. We believe they are preparing to disappear entirely." "How long do we have?" Elena asked. "Days, possibly weeks at most. If we're going to act, it must be soon." Weber studied Marcus carefully. "Mr. Wellington, your cooperation could be the key to preventing these criminals from escaping justice. But the risks are substantial. They will spare no effort to silence you." Marcus had been thinking about this moment for the entire voyage. His old life was gone regardless. He could either help bring down the network that had destroyed it, or spend the rest of his life in hiding while they continued to operate with impunity. "I'll do whatever you need," he said. "But I want guarantees about protecting innocent people who might be caught in the crossfire." Weber nodded approvingly. "That can be arranged. We have extensive witness protection capabilities, and unlike American programs, ours are managed by multiple countries with no single point of failure." They took the train to Paris, then another to Lyon, where Interpol headquarters occupied a modern complex that looked more like a corporate campus than a law enforcement facility. Marcus was impressed by the international cooperation evident everywhere, agents from dozens of countries working together against transnational crime. The briefing room where they met the task force was equipped with sophisticated technology that allowed real-time coordination with law enforcement agencies around the world. Maps, photographs, and financial charts covered the walls, showing the scope of Petrov's criminal empire. "Mr. Wellington," said the task force leader, a French woman named Inspector Dubois, "we have been investigating Victor Petrov's organization for 3 years. Your inside knowledge could help us understand how they move money through legitimate businesses." For the next 2 days, Marcus provided detailed information about every aspect of his business relationship with Petrov: bank account numbers, shipping schedules, contact information for key personnel, financial projections that might reveal the true scope of their operations. But, as they worked, disturbing news continued to arrive from America. Marcus's groundskeeper Miguel had been found dead in an apparent robbery. Mrs. Chun, his housekeeper, had disappeared from her apartment with signs of a struggle. His business partners were being systematically intimidated or eliminated. "They're cleaning house," Elena observed grimly, "removing anyone who might connect them to legitimate businesses." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. All these innocent people were suffering because he had been too eager to expand his business empire, too willing to overlook warning signs in pursuit of profit. On the 3rd day, Inspector Weber announced that they were ready to move. "We have coordinated simultaneous raids on Petrov facilities in 8 countries, he said. "Your information has allowed us to map their entire network." "What about Petrov himself?" Marcus asked. "We believe he's in Prague, at a facility that serves as the headquarters for their European operations. If we can capture him alive, he might provide information about their contacts in law enforcement and government." The raids were scheduled for dawn European time, allowing for maximum coordination across time zones. Marcus watched from the Interpol Operations Center as reports came in from teams around the world. Banks were sealed, shipping facilities secured, suspected operatives arrested. But, as the operation progressed, it became clear that Petrov's organization had been warned. Many facilities were found empty, their contents removed days earlier. Financial accounts had been drained, leaving only minimal balances. The network was collapsing, but the criminals were escaping. "Prague team reports the headquarters facility is abandoned," Weber announced grimly. "They found evidence of recent activity, but no personnel or documentation." Elena turned to Marcus. "They knew we were coming." Someone leaked the operation details. The implications sent a chill through the room. Even this international task force, with representatives from multiple countries and sophisticated security protocols, had been compromised. Petrov's reach extended further than anyone had imagined. Inspector Dubois called for a security review of all personnel with AC 6 months after fleeing Lyon. Marcus stood in a small apartment overlooking Prague's Old Town Square, watching the same building where Viktor Petrov's organization had once operated. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had come full circle to the heart of the criminal empire that had destroyed his life. Elena sat at a table covered with photographs, financial documents, and surveillance equipment. They had spent the intervening months gathering intelligence independently, tracking the scattered remnants of Petrov's network across Europe. What they had discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. "The good news is they're not as invulnerable as we thought," Elena said, pointing to a chart showing financial transactions. "When they fled so quickly, they made mistakes, left trails they normally would have covered." Marcus joined her at the table. His appearance had changed dramatically over the past months. Gone was the soft businessman who had relied on others for protection. Daily training with Elena, constant vigilance, and the harsh reality of life as a fugitive had transformed him into someone harder, more capable. "The bad news is they've reorganized under new leadership," Elena continued. "Viktor Petrov is dead. His own people killed him when he failed to eliminate us. The new leader is someone called the Architect, and he's even more ruthless." The name sent a chill through Marcus. During their months of investigation, they had heard whispers about the Architect, a shadowy figure who specialized in building criminal networks that appeared completely legitimate on the surface. If he was now running Petrov's organization, they were dealing with an even more dangerous enemy. "Do we know his real identity?" Marcus asked. "That's the shocking twist. I've been analyzing communication patterns, financial flows, operational signatures." Elena pulled out a photograph. "The Architect isn't some mysterious criminal mastermind. He's FBI Deputy Director James Harrison." Marcus stared at the photo in disbelief. He recognized Harrison from newspaper articles and television interviews, a decorated law enforcement official with 30 years of experience, a man who had been mentioned as a potential future FBI director. "Are you certain?" "The evidence is overwhelming. Harrison has been using his position to provide intelligence to criminal organizations for at least 5 years. He's the leak that compromised our investigation, the reason Petrov's people always seemed one step ahead of law enforcement." The implications were staggering. If a high-ranking FBI official was actually running a criminal network, it explained how Petrov's organization had operated with such impunity. They hadn't been evading law enforcement. They had been receiving protection from within law enforcement. "How do we expose someone with that much power and protection?" Marcus asked. Elena smiled grimly. "We use the same tactics they used against us. We gather irrefutable evidence, and then we make it public in a way that can't be suppressed or discredited." Over the following weeks, they implemented a plan that was both simple and audacious. Instead of working through official channels that could be compromised, they would expose the entire network through the media and public pressure. Marcus used his remaining contacts in the business world to access the safety deposit boxes he had mentioned during the ocean crossing. The documents inside provided concrete evidence of financial transactions between Petrov's organization and businesses across 3 continents. Elena coordinated with journalists from multiple countries, providing them with copies of the evidence while maintaining her own safety through anonymity. The story began to break simultaneously in newspapers, television programs, and online platforms around the world. But the Architect wasn't content to let them expose his network without retaliation. 3 days after the first stories appeared, Marcus and Elena found themselves once again running for their lives as teams of assassins converged on Prague. This time, however, they were better prepared. Months of survival had taught them to always have multiple escape routes, to never stay in one location long enough to be cornered, to trust no one completely. They made their way across Europe, staying ahead of their pursuers while continuing to feed information to journalists and law enforcement agencies that could be trusted. The media coverage grew into an international scandal, with calls for investigations at the highest levels of government. Marcus watched the destruction of his former business empire from a safe house in a small Swiss village. Every company he had built, every partnership he had formed, every success he had achieved was being exposed as connected to criminal money laundering. His reputation was destroyed, but, strangely, he felt liberated. The wealth and status he had once pursued so relentlessly had been built on lies and corruption. Losing it all had freed him to become someone he could actually respect, someone who stood for truth and justice rather than profit and power. Elena received confirmation that Harrison had been arrested along with 47 other officials across 6 countries. The network that had seemed so powerful and untouchable was crumbling under the weight of public exposure and international pressure. "It's over," she said, reading the latest reports. "The architect is finished, and his organization has collapsed completely." But Marcus knew it wasn't quite over for him. There would be trials, testimony, years of legal proceedings as authorities worked to untangle the full scope of the criminal network. He would spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, wondering if some forgotten associate might seek revenge. Yet for the first time in years, he felt genuinely proud of his accomplishments. He had helped expose corruption at the highest levels of government and business. He had prevented countless future victims from being exploited by the criminal network. He had chosen justice over personal safety. A year later, Marcus testified before an international tribunal investigating money laundering and corruption. His inside knowledge of Petrov's operations provided crucial evidence that led to hundreds of convictions and the recovery of billions of dollars in stolen assets. When the proceedings were finally complete, Marcus was offered a new identity and relocation through witness protection programs. But he declined. He had grown tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of being someone other than himself. Instead, he chose to start over in a small town where nobody knew his history. He opened a modest consulting business, helping small companies avoid the kind of financial traps that had once ensnared him. His clients were family businesses, local entrepreneurs, people who valued honesty over profit margins. Elena left law enforcement and joined him, having discovered that she preferred working directly with people rather than bureaucratic institutions. They married in a simple ceremony attended by a few friends they had made in their new community. Marcus never regained his billions or his status as a business tycoon. But he had something more valuable: peace of mind, genuine relationships, and the knowledge that he had done the right thing when it mattered most. On quiet evenings, he sometimes reflected on the strange journey that had brought him from a mansion to a modest apartment, from wealth to simplicity, from moral blindness to clear purpose. The warning Elena had given him that first night, "Be silent if you value your life," had ultimately saved him in ways neither of them had imagined. The silence hadn't been about hiding from physical danger, though that had been real enough. It had been about quieting the noise of ambition and greed long enough to hear his conscience. The life he had valued so highly, the money, the power, the status, had been built on foundations that couldn't survive honest examination. Marcus discovered that true wealth couldn't be measured in bank accounts or business empires. It existed in the trust of good friends, the satisfaction of honest work, and the peace that came from living according to principles rather than profits. The billionaire who had come home to danger had died that night. But from his ashes had risen someone better, a man who understood that the most valuable life was one lived in service to something greater than himself. Sometimes former business associates or reporters would track him down, wanting to interview the man who had brought down an international criminal network. Marcus always politely declined. The story wasn't about him. It was about the hundreds of law enforcement officers, journalists, and ordinary citizens who had worked together to expose corruption and seek justice. His true victory wasn't in destroying his enemies or recovering his lost fortune. It was in building a life he could be proud of, surrounded by people who valued him for who he was rather than what he owned. In the small consulting firm he ran with Elena, Marcus kept a framed quote on his desk: "Integrity is doing the right thing when nobody is watching." But he had learned something even more important. Sometimes integrity meant doing the right thing when everybody was watching, even when it cost everything you thought you valued. The maid who had warned him to be silent if he valued his life had been more prophetic than either of them realized. She had saved not just his physical life, but his soul. And, in the end, that had proven to be worth more than all the billions he had lost. As Marcus looked out the window of his modest office at the ordinary people living their ordinary lives, he smiled. He was one of them now, no longer a billionaire, no longer famous, no longer powerful. Just a man who had learned that the most extraordinary life was often the most ordinary one, lived with extraordinary honesty. The shocking twist in his story wasn't that a trusted partner had betrayed him, or that law enforcement had been corrupted, or even that he had lost everything he thought mattered. The real twist was that losing everything had been the greatest gift of his life. Marcus Wellington, the billionaire, was gone forever. But the man who had taken his place was someone worth being, someone who understood that true wealth lay not in what you could acquire, but in what you were willing to sacrifice for the right reasons. And, in the end, that made all the difference. Cess to operational details. But Marcus knew it was too late. The network they had been hunting had vanished like smoke, leaving behind only empty buildings and dead witnesses. What now? Marcus asked Elena privately. Now we become the hunted again, she replied. They know where we are, and they know what we know. Our only chance is to stay one step ahead until we can find another way to expose them. As they prepared to flee Lion, Marcus reflected on the bitter irony of his situation. He had started as a successful businessman with everything to lose. Now he was a man with nothing to lose, which made him incredibly dangerous to the criminal organization that had destroyed his life. Perhaps that was exactly what he needed to be. Formal surveillance. The ship's captain owes favors to people in our network. Marcus looked at his new passport. According to the documentation, he was now David Miller, a middle management consultant from Ohio. The photo was his, but somehow the expert forger had made subtle changes that altered his appearance significantly. The ship leaves tomorrow night, Sarah continued. That gives us time to complete your transformation. /marked car and a head start. But you need to go now. I've already had 3 calls tonight asking about unusual activity in the area. Elena and Marcus exchanged glances. Their hunters were closing in, using official channels to track them. Time was running out. We'll take the car, Elena said. And, Chief, forget you ever saw us tonight. Morrison nodded grimly. What about Mr. Wellington's property? The estate. Marcus felt a stab of loss thinking about the mansion, the ancestral home that had sheltered 4 generations of his family. Let it burn, he said quietly. It was never really mine anyway. Elena considered this. How far? 50 yards through open ground. But there's a drainage ditch that runs most of the way. It's risky, but it's better than staying here. She checked her watch again. My backup should have been here by now. Something's gone wrong with the operation. The implications of that statement chilled Marcus to the bone. If Elena's backup wasn't coming, they were completely on their own against a team of professional killers. His wealth, his connections, his power, none of it mattered now. His survival depended entirely on a federal agent he had met less than an hour ago. Stay low and follow my lead, Elena instructed. And remember what I told you. Be silent if you value your life.